on News Radio 950 WIBX and WIBX950.com. The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Town Square Media or its advertisers. Now, First Look.
A cool, rainy Thursday morning. Good morning. Welcome to First Look on News Radio 950 WIBX. And, of course, you can listen online at WIBX950.com. Joined in studio this morning by Jeanette Lenoir. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. You made it back for day two. I thought maybe doing the show yesterday would scare you off.
Well, I'm still nervous, but no, I don't scare that easily.
We're joined in studio this morning by Congressman Michael Arcuri. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Good morning. Good, thank you. Good morning, Jeff. Good morning, Jeanette.
Good morning.
Of course, we talked to your opponent yesterday, Richard Hanna, on the program. The first thing we asked Richard about was campaign ads, specifically ads targeting, not so much touting what someone has done or what they plan to do, but what are referred to as attack ads. I know your campaign has one targeting Mr. Hanna and his business practices. It mentions some lawsuits. It mentions, I believe, complaints that were filed. Can we talk a little bit this morning about why you chose to focus on his business dealings as we approach the election here?
Sure. You know, a couple of things. And I think that, you know, the so-called negative ads net out to zero. If both sides are doing them, they you know, when all is said and done, it's zero. And a couple of thoughts on that. I mean, don't forget, last year, 2 years ago, when Mr. Hanna and I ran against each other, I didn't run any negative ads. I ran positive ads. He ran negative ads. I mean, he was saying things about me that were, you know, pretty outlandish. You know, we ran positive ads, and this time, you know, I didn't run any ads, and he started, you know, with the negative ads right off the bat. And again, you know, I had to make a decision whether or not I wanted to respond to it. And again, based upon the fact that they net out to zero, I think, you know, you have to respond by doing it. Now, let me say this, that if I would pull my negative ads in an hour if he pulls his. And I offer that challenge to him. Pull your ads, pull your negative ads, I'll pull mine. Let's talk about the issues. I don't think he'll do that because he really doesn't talk a lot about the issues. I mean, you know, we talk about our vision for the future. I talk about our plan for the future. That's what I think this campaign needs to be about. Unfortunately, you know, I mean, if you see a lot of the ads that are being targeted against me are what they call independent expenditures. They're these groups that no one's ever heard of, based out of Texas, based out of, you know, that are about free trade, about outsourcing jobs. They're, you know, I mean, they're hitting us with, I mean, literally about $1 million worth of ads through our 3 districts. Because we have not only Utica, obviously we have the Syracuse media market and the Binghamton media market. So, you know, again, I would absolutely love to just run positive ads, and I would in a second pull my ads. You know, if Mr. Hanna wanted to do that, I issue that challenge to him, and I'll pull it, and let's just talk positive. Let's talk about our vision for the future.
He had indicated yesterday, I in fact asked him about this. I know there are a few different groups, as you just alluded to, targeting you. I see the one where you're holding a folder in your hand, and then it's a mirror version of you.
Yeah, I try not to watch those too often.
Essentially saying you flip-flop. I know that the healthcare issue, you took some criticism from your own party and some folks who had supported you last time around.
Right.
I know we've discussed it on the program again, but I figured we could mention it again because you knew this was going to come up again this time around.
But let me say this, because you know, I'm really glad you asked that, because if you remember, the first time that I said I have a real problem with the second healthcare bill was here on this show, sitting right where I'm sitting right now.
March 3rd.
Yes, and you were sitting right where you were. And remember, that was at least 2 or 3 weeks before the vote. Now, I think the thing that I have the biggest problem with Mr. Hanna is he's untruthful about that. He says things like, I received a pass. You don't get a pass on votes like this. And the more important thing is, you can verify that. I mean, you can look at the articles when I came out and said, I am against this healthcare vote. That was long before there was any decision made by anyone about whether or not there were enough votes, whether or not they had. In fact, they didn't have the votes when I took my position. Additionally, you know, the Working Families Party, I always received their endorsement. I didn't receive their endorsement this time around because I voted no on health care. So, you know, look, I took a tough position, and I did it because I felt that the bill was, my position on health care hasn't changed. The bill changed. I didn't think it was the right bill for America. It certainly wasn't the right bill for my district, and I voted no on it.
Sticking with the party endorsements, the moderates line, your moderates line, was in the news this week because it upheld a challenge, I believe, for Mr. Hanna. There was an issue because it was New York moderates, and that's not allowed, but still the line was allowed to stand as long as you dropped New York from it.
That's correct. And we're very proud of that. In order to create a separate line the way we did, you need signatures of 3,500 people, which is a pretty big task. Our volunteers went out, and we were able to get 7,300 people to sign that line. I mean, that's pretty, that's pretty good grassroots support. And I'm proud about that because, a lot of people like to have different lines. We see a lot of people today, they don't want to vote on a Democratic line. They don't want to vote on a Republican line. They don't want to vote conservative. They want to vote for the candidate. And I think by having that line gives people an opportunity to do that. And frankly, I think it better than anything else represents what I am for the district. I'm a moderate. The National Journal, which is a nonpartisan magazine that's published every year, they list me as the most centrist, moderate voting member of the House of Representatives. I mean, that's all of Congress, Senate, and House of Representatives. So I vote 50-50 with both sides. And I think that reflects our district. People don't care about if it's a Democratic idea or a Republican idea. They're tired of that around here. People want to know, hey, what are your ideas? So I hope that we can today talk about ideas for the future and vision, because that's where I think I separate myself from Mr. Hanna, is what our vision for the future is. Because it's really easy to sit there and say, here's what's wrong. Hey, we're upstate New Yorkers. We've been around for a while. We know what's wrong. What the question is, what I think people need to look at is what are our ideas for the future, and what have we done to make things better.
Just before we get into the vision of the future, one more thing, because I had asked Mr. Hanna this yesterday about Tea Party support and whether or not he would consider himself a Tea Partier if he wasn't running for office. You took a lot of criticism approaching the vote, even though you had said you'd vote against it. I remember, I forget the senator's name. Was it a senator or a congressman at the train station in Utica when the Tea Party had showed up?
Oh, that was a Congress. That was the majority leader, Steny Hoyer.
Steny Hoyer, yeah. After you voted against the health care bill, I know the Working Families Party was upset. Did you hear back positive remarks from Tea Partiers who had been asking you to vote against the health care bill?
I don't know. It's very difficult, I think, for people with these labels that we feel like we have to give everybody. I'm not sure who said that they liked it or who said they didn't like it. I would say many more of my constituents were pleased with my vote. Some were obviously unhappy with it. But that just leads me to just another quick point I want to make. Somebody said to me the other day, this is a Republican district. No, this isn't a Republican district. It's not a Democratic district. It's not a Tea Party district. It's a district of the people. And, that's what this race is all about. Who better, I think, represents the people of the 24th district? Who is willing to do more? Who has better vision for the future? And that's what this is about. So I'm not sure if the Tea Party people liked it or didn't like it. I know that I think many more of my constituents were pleased with my vote than were unhappy with it.
Well, you said you wanted to talk about your visions for the future. What are your visions for the future, and what are your specific plans moving forward, working for the 24th Congressional District?
We've looked at this in terms of what we think is the best way to approach it. It's all about jobs and the economy, and we know that we're in this district. We've seen good times, we've seen tough times, but I look at it this way. People always ask me, how do you get elected? You get elected one vote at a time. How do you fix the economy? One job at a time, one industry at a time. But we can't reinvent the wheel. Look, we know what it's like. We have been the manufacturing hub of the entire country in this region. So I think the way to do it is let's look at our strengths and let's build on our strengths. And from that idea, we came up with this idea. It's an acronym. It's called teamwork. And we feel that, look, we're going to restore the economy in two ways, by hard work and by teamwork. And by teamwork, we have an acronym, and it stands for the team. T is for transportation and infrastructure. The E is for education. The A is for agriculture, and the M is for manufacturing. We think those are our four greatest resources here after our people. And obviously our people are our greatest resource, and they are what make those four strong. But let's talk a little bit about transportation. I mean, we are on a great rail hub. Utica has an incredible railroad station, and we are on the only link between Chicago and New York City and Washington for the high-speed rail. I have worked very, very hard on getting additional money in for rail. You know, we talk about high-speed rail. It's really more speed rail. It's getting the trains to run on time and in a more reliable and faster way. I think that is clearly a strength of ours. We are on the Erie Canal, on the Barge Canal. Also our roads. We have great north-south access roads. That is one way that we can continue to get products and goods from point A to point B, and we are centrally located. Second thing is education. We have some of the greatest educational facilities, not just in the country, but in the world. Places like SUNY IT, Utica College, Hamilton. In our district, my district, you know, the 24th, Cornell, Oneonta, great colleges, Hartwick, Hobart. So what I think we need to do is take those centers and turn them into not just places where people work and get educated, but as sort of economic engines. So think about this. We were able to get about $1 million, actually over $1 million for Utica College to build their cybersecurity center. Now, not only did we get the money for the brick and mortar for that, but then we worked and we were able to get legislation passed that creates a scholarship fund for young people that go into cybersecurity. Every statistic shows that the greatest need for the future is going to be in the cybersecurity. Now, not only is that great for Utica College, but think about this. What do we have out in Rome? We have the lab, and the lab hires, you know, many people in cybersecurity. That's their specialty. So now we're not only creating a place for people to get educated, we're creating a talented workforce for Rome, which employs over 1,000 people. That's the kind of synergy that we need to develop. Agriculture, clearly that's our biggest industry here. So some of the things that we have done, I think going forward, the 2012 Farm Bill will be critical. We need to work on certain aspects of that. Well, I've authored a bill, when I say authored, I've introduced a bill that we've written that says that we should transfer the cost of milk, shipping milk, away from the dairy farmers who are struggling onto the processors, onto the companies like Dairy Lee. They can better afford to pay it. So that would save dairy farmers what we call about $1 to $1.50 and what we call a hundredweight. That's how they ship milk, 100 pounds of milk. That would save dairy farmers a huge amount of money. That's what we should be doing. Additionally, there's a bill that, and I think you guys covered it, that we talk about. I support the cost of bill. It's about supply management for milk. We need to make sure the new Farm Bill has a supply management component in there, and there's a number of those, but that will dramatically help our dairy farmers. Now, think about this. We have a company, Ag Market, they make Chobani yogurt. Huge. They just expanded, created 100 jobs in Shenango County. That's the kind of thing that agriculture can do for us. And the last thing, and I think our greatest resource, is our manufacturing, because our people are so good. I mean, Remington Arms, think about this. 4 years ago, they were talking about shutting down. You know, everyone was worried, will they shut Remington Arms? In fact, I was out there yesterday shaking hands, and one of the workers said, hey, remember 4 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, we were really worried we were going to shut down. Now they're over 1,000 people, and the way that we did that is we got some legislation passed that allowed them to make the a silencer there that they can put on the military sniper rifle. We were just able, Senator Schumer and I were just able to get $28 million for the continue to produce and rehab the sniper rifles there. That's a great asset for us. Unison Industries down in Norwich, we were able to create an additional help to save the 300 jobs there and create an additional 75. I mean, that's the manufacturing base that we have. We need to continue to make that strong. Recently, and again, you guys covered it this week, the currency manipulation bill. That's critical because that will help companies like Revere Copper in Rome, Nucor Steel out in Auburn. So we need to make sure that our manufacturing base is strong, and we're not. You know, we have to stop this outsourcing of jobs overseas. We cannot survive as an economy, as a service economy. Any country that doesn't make things cannot be the most powerful nation on earth. We are the most powerful nation on earth because we make things. We are the best at making things. We need to continue to be able to do that, and that's what our plan for the future is about.
Some of our listeners have expressed real concerns over high-speed rail. We'll get to that on the other side. We're joined on First Look this morning by Congressman Michael Arcuri. Back with more First Look after that. WIBX News Time 8:27. Joined on First Look this morning by Congressman Michael Arcuri. We're talking about some election issues. You mentioned your teamwork plan, and we received, after we mentioned on the show yesterday that you would be joining us, we received 2 emails, in fact, about concerns with high-speed rail. The concerns expressed were if these rails run parallel to current railroad tracks, what does that do to the rural roads that they run over?
Great question. Excellent. Actually, and there's 2 really good points about that, Jeff. One is that part of the way they have to design that is that they have to make it special. That's part of the cost, so that it doesn't hurt the roads. It'll be no different on the roads than the ordinary track is. I mean, it's no different whatsoever.
Kind of sunken into the...
it would just be, that's the cost in creating the overpass. But why it's more affordable in New York is because we already have the bed there. Like if you look at the railroad tracks, the 2 railroad tracks that run along the Barge Canal, there's a 3rd bed right next to it because there used to be actually 4 tracks, so they will run it right on that. So there will be no damage to the rural roads. But let me say this, the benefit to the rural roads is enormous, and it's because of this. We talk about this all the time. I'm on the transportation and on the rail subcommittee, is that what we will be doing is taking more heavy trucks off the local roads. And that's what I hear the biggest complaint from localities, especially down in the Finger Lakes region. They say, hey, what's happening is trucks are coming up, garbage trucks from New York City, and they're getting off of the toll roads, getting on local roads, and they're damaging our local roads. And when they go damage the local roads, that's a cost to the local governments. So by creating a better ability to ship heavy goods by rail, we're actually helping the roads stay in better repair. So, and we keep talking about high-speed rail. That's really not the best way to describe it. It's really better, it's more speed rail. It's getting the trains to go, people think of high-speed rail being 200 miles an hour, yes. But the rail that we're working on in New York will be 100 to 150 miles an hour. Right now, the trains in most areas along the New York corridor, what we call the Empire Corridor, go about 55, 60 miles an hour. Those trains can do 95 miles an hour now without anything, just by improving the rail. So that's really what we're talking about.
All right. We do have a caller on the line we'd like to get to. This is, I believe, Carl in Rome. Good morning, Carl.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Good morning, Carl.
Good morning. Congressman Arcuri, you voted yes for what ended up being a nearly $800 billion stimulus bill that was loaded with what appeared to be wasted pork. Did you vote knowing that it had this needless pork in it, or were you one of the members of Congress that didn't take the time to read the bill? Respectfully.
Oh, respectfully. No, that's a great question. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that the bill had. Like, the VA Center out in Rome. We spent $1 million on fixing the VA Center and making it better in Rome. That's an incredible help to the people in Rome, especially the veterans. Not just in Rome, but the veterans in Utica and the veterans in Herkimer. And it not only did that, but it put local people to work in our area. That was very important. There were a lot of roads that needed to be paved in Rome that, frankly, the city of Rome didn't have the money to do, the state didn't have the money to do, so they were done through the stimulus bill. There's a facility, a healthcare facility on Oneida Street in Utica. Again, stimulus money went to that. These things absolutely there was a tough decision to make, and it's pretty easy to sit there after the fact and say, maybe we should have, maybe we shouldn't have, but, in tough times you have to make decisive decisions, and that was one of those decisions. And as a result of the stimulus bill, although some people, aren't happy to hear it, the stimulus bill held employment, kept employment from falling to 20%. Additionally, firefighters in Rome, policemen in Utica, and teachers throughout Oneida County kept their job as a result of that. And I think most importantly, and this is the point I like to make, and County Executive Pacenti, who incidentally is Republican, says this all the time, but for the FMAT money that they received that Oneida County received, and I've heard the same thing from Jim Wallace in Herkimer County. But for that, they would have had to dramatically raise property taxes in Oneida and Herkimer County because that money was critical. Now, think about how tough that would have been if local property taxes were raised. So, I read the bill. I think that the bill worked. It did what it was supposed to do. It kept employment from falling to 20%, and it put people to work, and it did some great things, especially when I think of that veterans facility and I hear how many people use it and are happy with it. I think it was the right decision to make.
Well, I'd like to say that there are a lot of people like Carl in Rome who feel that your vote for the stimulus bill was a bad idea or a wrong move. Why do you think there's still this sentiment out there, considering how much good the stimulus bill has done? Do you think Democrats are doing enough to brag about what they've done, all the success they've had? I mean, is the message going out enough? I mean, why do you think you're still getting people like Carl saying I think this might have been, a wrong vote?
Well, I think one of the things, Jeanette, is that there's so much partisanship. I mean, the difficulty is this. You have people, like Sherry Bowler, who used to reach across the aisle. We're not seeing as much of that. I reach across the aisle. I'm a blue dog Democrat. I'm a more moderate Democrat. We try to work, but we're not seeing a lot of that cooperation. So we're seeing people saying, turning bills like the stimulus bill that I think were necessary into political, tools, wedges, if you will, to try to really, divide the American people. I think one of the differences between the Depression in 1929 and what we recently saw is we took action quickly this time by passing the stimulus bill, the recovery bill. In 29, they didn't do that. Hoover didn't do that, and we saw unemployment fall to 25%. So I think unfortunately, both sides are using much of what happens as, political tools to really drive a wedge in between Americans, and I think that's what has people so frustrated, and that's what I'm working to try to prevent. That's why you don't hear me talking about Democrats, Republicans. I talk about what I voted for, what I didn't vote for, and what I think my vision and ideas are for the future. And again, there's no such thing as a Democratic or Republican idea. There's only ideas that work or don't work.
Let me ask you this. Despite successes in the stimulus bill, and whether you blame, not you, but people blame the Obama administration or they want to blame Bush, the country faces an enormous amount of debt. Going forward, how do we get out of that debt?
Great question. A couple of things. I was co-sponsor of a bill called, we call it PAYGO, but it's pay as you go. And it's something that we had during the Clinton administration, and that's how we balanced the budget. And that's very simple. It's what we all do at home. You don't spend it if you don't have it. So in other words, you don't borrow for it. Either you have to raise taxes, which we're not going to do, or you have to cut another program if you want to increase spending. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I am co-sponsor of legislation that will do a straight across the board 2% cut. I think if we cut 2 to 3% off of every program, because it's very difficult to say that's a bad program, this is a bad program, so let's cut straight across the board, and I think that would be one of the very good ways of doing it. Now, let me take that one step further. I introduced a bill, and I think this is the best way to keep taxes down, this is the best way to cut spending. I introduced a bill called the Congressional Belt-Tightening Act, and what that does is that would cut salaries of congressmen by 5% for the next 2 years, and also cut our own budgets by 5%. And the reason I think that's critically important is then we have cut our own budgets and our own salaries by 5%. Then we turn around and say to every other, program that's out there, except defense and homeland security, is let's cut 2 to 3% from your budget. And I've done this when people have come into my office and said to me, Congressman, you can't, will you support an increase for our program? And I say, no, I won't, and then I say, but I have cut my own budget. So I will do that next year, but I've already done it. So last year I said to my staff, I want you to cut 5% from our budget. And my chief of staff said what most chief of staff say, boss, we can't do that. I said, yes, we can. So-and-so, somebody retired. Let's not fill that vacancy right away. Let's wait a month or two. Instead of ordering 3 computers, let's order 1 computer, that kind of thing. We didn't cut 5%, we cut 8%. And we turned back to the federal government last year $120,000. And this year we're on track to turn back about $180,000 just by making cuts. So it's possible to do. We'll do it next. We'll do it this year, and we'll do it again next year, and I'll cut my own salary by 5% next year. My wife isn't real happy with that. I think it's the kind of example that we need to set. I mean, that's what Americans, I think, are so upset about, is the fact that it's got to be not just talk the talk. You have to walk the walk as well. And that's why I think my bill is important to the across-the-board cut, because then we can say to other groups, look, we've cut ourselves 5%. We can cut your program by 2% or 3%.
We've got several callers on the line with questions for Congressman Michael Arcuri. We will start with Rich. Good morning, Rich.
Good morning. How are you? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. Thanks, Rich. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm a little bit of a history buff, kind of a little bit, and I heard you mention when I was waiting, you were mentioning the collapse of the economy in 29. If you look a little bit further back in history, in 1920, if I'm not mistaken, we were facing the same economic crisis that we're facing right now, and Calvin Coolidge was elected, and they went through the federal government, and they basically almost cut everything in half, and they got rid of a lot of state. Basically, the whole thing was they took a lot of fat off. And what happened was, obviously, when you cut taxes on the American people, the government ends up starting generating more money, so on and so forth. They get more revenues. But here's the thing. That's what gave us the Roaring 20s. And it really kind of surprises me that a lot of people aren't aware of this, what Calvin Coolidge did. Never got any credit for it, so on and so forth. But yeah, I think rather than, we need to cut taxes in New York State, period, right across the board. We need to create jobs. And you create jobs in this state by cutting the tax. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you want to put people to work out here in New York, because people in New York want to work, we don't want to be on assistance. We need to create more jobs in New York State, so we need to have tax incentives to get businesses to come back here, like a tax holiday or tax incentives and so on and so forth, and start cutting the fat off of New York State steak.
I know, but obviously those are New York State questions, and I don't disagree with you at all. As a congressional representative, we deal with, obviously federal issues, but I will point this out. Don't forget that the recovery bill, the so-called stimulus bill, one half of the bill gave tax breaks and tax refunds across the board to all Americans, seniors, to retired folks, to working families, to help stimulate the economy. So clearly that was a part of the recovery bill, and that's one thing that many people miss. I'm one of the people that wanted us to do more transportation-related things in the recovery bill, but more than half of the bill was dedicated to tax breaks, tax refunds, and tax breaks, things like allowing businesses to buy new merchandise and depreciate it quicker. That's a great thing to stimulate the economy. For instance, so if you own a small business and let's say you buy an expensive computer or expensive printer, normally you can only depreciate that as a business over a long period of time. Under the recovery stimulus bill, what we were saying is if you buy that piece of equipment, we'll let you depreciate it very quickly so you get a quick tax benefit. We'll even let you take your loss. If you had a loss back several years ago, we'll let you claim that and take that forward. These were all things that were part of the stimulus bill that really helped small business to generate jobs. So that was a big part of what we did in the recovery bill, and something, unfortunately, that a lot of people aren't talking about and have sort of ignored.
We do have a lot of callers on the line. I'll ask that you please ask your question, and then the congressman will answer it, and we'll move on as quick as we can. This is Bob. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Bob. How are you today?
From Utica. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I just want a quick question. I'm not sure the geographic area of your district. I know it covers a large area, and my profession, I am a New York State licensed and certified real estate appraiser. A year and a half ago, Mr. Cuomo made an arrangement with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac to basically cut our income in half, and yet very few people know about this. And it was called the HVCC, which now is the Financial Reform Act is trying to go away, and the appraisal management companies don't want this to go away because they take basically half our fee that the homeowner pays for the appraisal. Homeowner doesn't even know about it. How do you feel about this, and what do you think can be done? Because this really involves hundreds of people in your district. You talk about saving 50 jobs, 25 jobs here and there, and that's great. But there's literally hundreds of real estate appraisers in your district who in the past year have had their income cut in half, and very few people know about it. And I'll hang up and listen to your answer, sir. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for the question. Again, that is a state issue, and I'm not completely familiar with the action that Attorney General Cuomo took in that regard. I will say this, however, that we have been very fortunate in our area in that we have not seen the dramatic drops in property values that have taken place in other parts of the country. In fact, it's amazing. Utica and Binghamton, which are the two extremes of our district, have actually seen property values increase. And part of the reason for that is our community banks have done a great job in not doing, pushing programs like the subprime program and that kind of thing. But I think it's even more than that. I think a lot of our local folks here are just smart people, and they don't bite off more than they can chew, and they're used to living day to day on what they have and not what they don't have. So I think we are fortunate in that we are still seeing a good number of home sales here, better than the national average, selling at actually probably a little more than they were selling at a short time ago, which is really incredibly unique for the real estate market that we are seeing. When you look at California, you look at Nevada, you look at Florida, we are really in a pretty good place.
We're talking this morning with Congressman Michael Arcuri. Back with more after this on WIBX. We are joined in studio this morning by Congressman Michael Arcuri. Thank you again so much for joining us.
I'd like to ask you about hydrofracking. I know that's an issue that's got some people divided. Some people want it because they think it'll bring money, it'll boost the economy up here. Others are worried about the environmental impacts it'll have on upstate New York and our water systems. Can you talk about your position on hydrofracking, and if you can inform our listening audience about what hydrofracking really is?
Great question. Thanks for that. And a lot of people here in the Utica, Rome area are not familiar with hydraulic fracking. So, but in the southern tier, the southern part of our district, it is the hottest topic of all. Hydraulic fracking is a process whereby you drill down very, very deep, oil companies, and then they inject a number of chemicals, toxic chemicals, benzenes and salt mixtures, into the shale deposit, what we call the Marcellus shale deposit. It splits apart the shale, and then the natural gas seeps back through, and they pump it up. Now, the problem with it is the fear that these chemicals that they're pumping in, number one, we don't always know what they are, that they are very toxic, and everyone knows they're toxic, and there's a fear that they will contaminate our groundwater. Now, we had all of New York basically opposed to it, and then the companies said, well, we're going to exempt the New York City water table and the Syracuse water table from it, which really enraged some of the people like me who said, wait a minute, if it's not safe enough for New York City, and if it's not safe enough for Syracuse, then why is it safe enough for Ithaca? Why is it safe enough for Oneonta? Why is it safe enough for Cortland when, they get large amounts of their water from groundwater? So that's really the issue. Now, about a month ago, Congress passed the CLARE Act, which was an act that addressed the problems down on the Gulf of Mexico. What I did is I added a provision to that bill. I amended it because it had to come out of our committee, the Transportation Committee, because we also do water infrastructure. And I added a provision that said that if they allow any drilling anywhere, that the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has to regulate oil companies on runoff water across their sites. Now think about this. If a community wants to build a school, the EPA regulates the groundwater runoff. If a farmer wants to build a new barn, EPA comes in around. Everyone in the country is regulated except oil and gas companies, and they didn't want it. So the more they didn't want it, I'm a former DA. When someone tells me they don't want it really bad, then there's got to be a reason why they don't want it. We put that in because we feel that that's then one of the necessary provisions to help keep the water clean, to make sure that we're regulating it. But we have some real concerns with the drilling. Three things that the state didn't review when the state did a review on this, and the three things that I think were important. One is they didn't do any review of how many wells you can put per square mile. I mean, that's a major issue. Can you put 1? Can you put 5? Secondly, we have a very unique surface, very porous surface here in upstate New York, and we're actually on an active fault line. I mean, people don't think about it because it's not like the San Andreas fault, but it's very active. We just get very small earthquakes now and again. That's very problematic when you're pumping, toxic chemicals into the ground. And third, our water systems, our sewer systems, don't have the capability to treat this water when it comes out. What's going to happen with this, what we call frac fluids, that has brine and salt and toxic chemicals like benzene in them after we get it out of the ground? Are we going to treat it in our water systems? Well, our water systems can't take it. Are we going to ship it somewhere? Are we going to put it in holding ponds? So we think that there are a number of issues that are really need to be resolved. Now, the reason that that's significant, because after the Marcellus Shale deposit starts in West Virginia and actually probably ends about in southern Oneida County. We then move into what's called the Utica Shale deposit, which is a little narrower, but nonetheless is the next area that can be, that can be used. So I think we need to make sure that we get this right. And I say this all the time. Natural gas, it's a great resource, but at best it's our second best resource. Our water is our greatest natural resource. And I see this all the time. We read reports all the time. The Southwest, they don't have water. The South, they're having trouble with water. What we do have in the Northeast is incredibly good water. We need to make sure that that is protected. That's our greatest natural resource.
But you're not completely against hydrofracking. You're saying there just has to be more studies done in order to... But there are people who are completely against it. They don't want it at all. They think, because first of all, the chemicals that they are injecting into the ground are a secret. They are not even allowed to be known. Why should they put secret ingredients underneath the ground that could affect people? And why should it, it even be a question of, maybe or maybe not? You're either, why would you support something that you don't even know that's going into the ground?
And I agree with you. And the companies say, well, it's a trade secret. And so we say, well, we don't need to know what it is, but make sure it's on file. Because here's the thing, and I tell this story all the time. I represent a place called Groton out in Tompkins County. And a few years ago, a milk truck overturned in Groton. Milk everywhere, and... We talk about this all the time. What if that were a truck full of fracking fluid and it tipped over? Because that's what they'd have to do. They'd have to ship it somewhere. Do we call in a hazmat team? Well, we don't know. Do we evacuate the town? We don't know, because we don't know what chemicals are in it. This is absolutely critical stuff. This is not something we can play around with. We don't want to have another Love Canal, because in 10 years, 20 years, when the oil companies leave, guess what? We still live here. And not just us, our children and our grandchildren are going to be here. We have to make sure that we don't own this planet. We're stewards of this planet for future generations. We have to make sure that we're leaving it in at least as good a shape for our children as it was when we inherited it.
So will you, work to make that chemical,
yes,
non-proprietary information?
Again, I don't need to know what it is, but I think that, the EPA, the DEC, they need to know what it is. And we have we put that piece in the Clear Act as well. That piece didn't pass. My piece passed. But that is part of a separate bill that Congressman Maurice Hinchey and myself, it's called the FRAC Act. And that has a number of the regulations, including making sure that the content of the chemical is known to the EPA and to the DEC. Again, that's critical. We need to know what we're dealing with, and I think more importantly, what are we going to do with these chemicals? Are we going to put them back in the ground? I don't think so. That's not what I want to see done. We're going to store them in ponds. And we're seeing problems in other parts of the country, so it's not like we're being alarmist. Things are happening in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. We see it all the time.
But would it really boost the economy if it did pass? Would it be a good thing for upstate New York?
Absolutely. It would clearly be a help to the economy if you talk about natural gas. But if you compare what water does for our economy and what natural gas does for our economy, clearly water is much better. Now, the argument is we can do this safely. If we can do it safely, I will support it. But here's, Jenna, and we were talking about this earlier. So supposing I drill on my land, all right, and we contaminate it, and you live 3 miles down the road, because this goes horizontal. They call it horizontal drilling. And we're drilling under your land. Now, not only am I making the money from it, I'm getting the royalties from it. your water might be polluted. And you may say, I don't want anything. I want to make sure my water is good. Well, guess what? You may have no control over it because I'm drilling on my property and your water may be contaminated as a result of me drilling. So, that's a real property right issue that we have as well. And then supposing you go to sell your house, is a bank going to say to you, well, you better get title insurance on that property because you don't have good water and we're not sure, or your water might be contaminated. These are real issues that need to be resolved before we go forward with this.
We've got Joe on the line. Good morning, Joe. Thanks for waiting.
You're welcome.
What's your question?
Hey, Joe. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm sure a lot of people are concerned about how you intend to vote on this Bush tax cuts when they come up, and I'm sure they will come up.
Great question. Thanks, Joe. That's a great question. I feel this way about it. I will vote to extend the Bush tax credits for the middle class indefinitely. The second piece of it, with respect to what they call the wealthier piece, the people that earn over $250,000, as I see it right now, when that bill comes before me, I will vote to extend that for 1 year or 2 years. And here's the reason why. A lot of people say, the wealthy people, if you're making over $250,000 a year, you can afford it. It's not about whether or not they can afford it. From my perspective, it's about the fact that economists on both sides of the aisle, guys like Mark Zandi, talk about the fact that, hey, by allowing the wealthiest Americans to have the additional tax cut will probably continue to help stimulate the economy. I think anything that we can do to help stimulate the economy is necessary at this point. So again, and I hear people, some people from criticize me and they say, oh, Mike, they can afford to pay it. They can, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is to make sure that we're doing everything we can to have the economy continue to turn the corner. And I use this comparison. I am a strong opponent of taking away the tax break for wealthy people who contribute to charities. And again, it's not about the fact that the wealthy people, whether they can afford it or they can't afford it. The thing is that we want to do everything we can to promote people giving to charity. So we have great charitable institutions. If the individuals are not donating to them and they do great work, then that's going to be something that the other taxpayers are going to have to pay for. So it's what makes sense. It's not a class warfare. It's not about who's rich, who's poor. It's about what makes the most sense for America. So based upon that, I would vote to extend the tax credits for the wealthiest Americans 1 year, maybe 2 years at the outset.
Congressman Michael Arcuri, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Jeanette, Jeff, thank you.